Hi, I'm Captain Larry Bell with Texas Fishing Tips, and this is your weekly fishing report.
Down here, Panther Lake, Panther Point, Swan Lake, that area, all back in here. These great wading area. Good amount of fish have been holding back in here. Again, we've had that hurricane that's been down in the Caribbean that's been pushing off, and it's pushed a lot of water back up in our estuaries here, and our bays have been reaping the benefits for it. And if you've been able to get back in some of these back lakes, whether it be this area here or Cottonwood or some of the other back lakes that are all up and down the St. Joe shoreline, you've been able to take advantage of some good fish that's been hanging back in these areas. When that water really gets up, starts to get high and gets pushed in here like that from those hurricanes way out there, then we benefit greatly from it. The fishing begins to pick up. The catching gets even better. Everything all the way around is good, and we just want those things to stay away from our area. They can hang out there as long as they want, but just don't come up into here. Anyway, Swan Lake area, the shoreline that heads all the way down to Cedar Lake and Twin Lake. These little lakes that pop off of this, there's little areas here that you can walk up in these little back lake cuts that are in along here. If you fish this area, you know exactly where I'm talking about. They've been holding everything. They've got trout in them. They've got redfish in them. They've got flounder in them. Even black drum, one or two single here or there or double, you can catch that. Cedar Lake has been really good. Down this edge, this shoreline here, working primarily two baits. Been working the down south twisted T original size, and been working the knock and tail heavy metal. Those two baits right there, both in a 4-inch, have been spectacular back in this area here. Now, if you want to spend the time and put the effort in and throw topwater, you will be very well rewarded for that. The topwater bite has been spectacular for the last week and a half. Man, it's just been really good in a lot of these different back lakes. The Cedar Lake, we haven't had as much success with a topwater bait as we've had in some other back lakes, but again, with that water pushed in here, bait being pushed back in these areas, the fish are hanging with the bait. So we're just working topwaters. We're working the down south. We're working the knock and tails. Again, everything's 16th ounce jig heads. We've got waist to belly deep water in some of this with the amount of water here, and it's fluctuating just a little bit. Not a great amount, but there's still a lot of water that's in here. This shoreline that's on this other side of Cedar Lake here, we've been working topwater down this. It's been very good. Lots of blow-ups, lots of takes, slaps, swirls. And if when that's happening, then you take your plastics and you start working the bait just a little bit deeper, or the double D. Double D's been pretty good as well. You get it down just a little bit down in their face, and you'll get back on those strikes, on those opportunities that you can catch these fish. This shoreline that's from Cedar Lake up to Twin on this outside edge here has been good. There's been trout hanging out here off of this. There's been some decent trout. They've been in that lower slot, 17.5 to 19-inch fish. So if you're looking for to keep a few trout to take home with you, then this is one of the areas that you might want to target if you're fishing up in this area, because there have been some decent trout hanging here. Twin Lakes has been the same thing. Trout, redfish, flounder back in these edges. Out on the points out here, we've been catching the flounder out there. Using burner shad primarily for flounder. The white ice, pearl. One thing I'm not a big fan of, and I've said it plenty of times, I'm not a big fan of the chartreuse, but if you get some of the burner shad that's got a little bit of chartreuse on the tail, it's been pretty good. Some of the clients that I've had have been throwing that, and they've done well with it. They've caught a couple of flounder, maybe 3. So that's been good there. Redfish that are back in the lakes, again, topwater bait, knock and tail lure has been good. Then the heavy metal, white ice as well. Again, the twisted T original size in the down south has been money. Back in these areas here, just working the edges, working the middle, working the shell that's scattered in and around that. If you want to get back here in the mangroves on around, getting these back lakes back here, it's all wadeable. Of course, again, with the amount of water that we've had pushing here, it's fishing deeper than it normally would be, which would be, waist deep to some of this. Now it's about belly deep in some, squishy bottom in some of these areas. It might get just a little bit to the top of your belly. So it's something to be aware of, just to take in consideration if you're going to wade back in these areas. Again, it's a great wading area. Lots of opportunity that are back in here. Plastics are working well, topwater's working well, double D, suspended baits. Like I said not too long ago, we're getting into the time for artificial baits that's fixing to just dominate these waters from now until late February, March, into April and May again. The upcoming 6 months is going to be spectacular for artificial guys and gals that throw those particular types of baits. Majors and minors have been money. Most of the bites that we've had have all been around the majors and minors. You know, you'll see it if you're following it, you're tracking it, you're taking close attention to it. You'll see that the bite starts to pick up as that bite frame begins. Somewhere in and around that, you'll start to see that bite frame pick up. You'll catch your fish, and then it'll kind of taper back off as you get away from that time frame. Then you're back to grinding in between your majors and minors, and if you have an opportunity to fish two bite frames in your fishing day, then you would be smart to do that, because, again, most of the bites have come in and around those majors and minors in these back lakes and these edges and out on these bay fronts. Again, baits working all up and down these areas here. Again, down south, knock and tail, double D, all those particular baits have all been topwater bait as well. If you like that explosion and the excitement of watching the topwater bait, spend some time with it. Throw it. It's worth it. Right now especially, I mean, the redfish are wearing it out. Good trout are wearing it out. So it's a lot of fun to throw these particular areas. And if you get up in this area, have a lot of fun. Take your time with it and enjoy your majors and minors, and you'll catch fish. Up here in the fingers of Carlos, this area here has been pretty good. There's been some trout that's been hanging along this area here. Inside, on this east side of Carlos, against the shoreline, that area up in there, all the way around to this point, back around here as you head toward the third chain of islands. If you want to get up inside the third chains, that would be something I would recommend. You got a great amount of shell that's there, and again, with the amount of water that we've had pushed in here, it's really kind of picked things up in that particular area, because that when that tide is starting to flow, it's flowing across that shell bar. You know, you got the deep drop that goes into that area there. It's all this in here, Cedar Flat, Cedar Dugout, up around those inside the shell there's been good. The little reef that's back there off that Carlos area there on this backside has been good. It's all been holding trout. We hadn't caught any redfish. That doesn't mean that they're not there. We just haven't caught any. There's been plenty of trout that's been caught. A lot of undersize, you know, all those 15s and 16s. We've pulled out a few that are in the 17.5 range. Not a tremendous amount of those. But again, the main thing that's been working just about everywhere we've been doing it. The two main baits we've been throwing plastic-wise has been the down south lure, Twisted Tea, White Ice, and the knock and tail in the heavy metal, and chicken of the sea, or greenback is what it looks like. But it's greenback is what it's called. But those two baits, or four baits between the two different brands, have been pretty much spot on up in this area. Again, 16th ounce jig heads. There's been when that tide is starting to move, it's been flowing pretty good. So we've been working those areas inside the shell with the fish will get packed up against that, so you can locate those somewhere up and down that. Get up on the inside, back toward in Mesquite there. It's kind of, you can't see it on this particular map, but if you continue to come back around, you'll see the area that I'm talking. It's called, if you know the runway, that area there, just around from the third chain, just off of the third chain, has been good up and down that edge there for scattered fish. You know, we found some flounder in that area. We found redfish in that area. Not too much of any particular one thing, but just scattered enough of one or two or the three particular species that we target, which for me it's trout, redfish, and flounder. More trout and redfish than anything in this particular area here. Come to the other side, just on the back side of the ICW here in Carlos, and working this shoreline here. So when we've had that hurricane that was down there in the Caribbean, the way that the wind has shifted, everything's been coming out of the north and northeast. If you've paid attention to this, that's where it's coming from. It's coming off the back side of that hurricane, so it shifted our wind directions. So we're not having so much a south-southeast breeze. We've had more north-northeast, maybe a little northwest from time to time. So this particular shoreline really does well with that particular wind pattern. Great structure here, good grass. You've got edges. You've got a lot of undulation that's up and down. Great amount of bait that's working in here, so you'll find fish. We found redfish up and down the shoreline. We found some scattered trout. Some have been very good trout, some mid-20s. So we've caught and released those as well. Scattered flounder every once in a while, but mainly redfish and trout, all this area up and down here. Again, majors and minors have been the key thing working in this particular part of the moon phase. You know, we're fixing to be on the backside of the new moon which that 10-day stretch, the 5 days that lead up to and the 5 days after the new moon are some of the absolute best each month. So if you're able to be on the water to fish these, then do it. This is a great time frame to do it heading into this week. This particular area here has been really good with the wind patterns we've had, and the point out here as you come up here off of Dunham in this area here. So again, work those particular baits in the down south and the knocking tails. You throw your topwater bait, it's been very good as well. Especially right now in this particular time of the year, man, the topwater bait's been spectacular. So again, work these areas well, take your time with it, fish the majors and minors, and you'll locate your fish. Up here in Dunham Bay, this area back here has been good for trout, redfish mainly. Maybe caught a couple of flounder out of here by accident, but mostly have been flounder and trout. Redfish and trout back in this area now. If you try to jump out and wade this particular side of the shoreline, prepare yourself to sink into about knee-deep to thigh-deep mud. I made this mistake, and it wasn't super fun. Made it for a little bit, was tired of dealing with that amount of mud. So got back to the boat, and we slid to the other side. So if you want to get on your trolling motor, or if the wind sets up properly for you to drift this side, that's fine. There's redfish on that shoreline. There's trout on that shoreline. You can find fish on this particular shoreline. It's just really difficult to wade. Now, you get up on this other side, there's a couple little back lake mouths that jump off of this. We fished those. We've pulled redfish out of those, both on the top water, plastics, double D's, suspended baits. Any of those have been all good back in Dunham Bay back here. Now, wading the area that you really want to jump out and wade is going to be on the northwest shoreline over here, the backside of the Aransas Wildlife Refuge. This shoreline here, all the way down toward Blackjack Point and Peninsula, is very wadeable, very easy to do. A little squishy here and there, but for the most part, it's pretty solid. A lot of scattered grass, tremendous amount of bait that are working up and down this edge here. It's been good. It's been better on a higher tide, but again, so for the last week or so, that hurricane that's been working down the Caribbean starting to slide out into the Atlantic now. It's pushed so much more water into our system, so it's fished like it's been on a high tide all the time. That's one of the reasons why this particular area has been very good. Topwater bait early. If you can get here, sun's popping around 7:15, 7:20. If you can be on this shoreline somewhere that you want to be, 6:50, 7 o'clock, where it's still enough light to see and you can navigate safely, but still dark enough that the fish really can't make out what they see or what they're hearing. It's just a good topwater bait. Spook Juniors, She Dog, Top Dog, any of those have been really good on here. Spook Junior is one of my favorites to throw. So anything that's working off this grass here, like I say, there's a lot of bait that's working up and down the shoreline. Work this whole area. You can get out in the middle on the opposite side of it and work around those islands if you want to. Some of that can get squishy, but again, it's deep enough right now that you can float your boat across it or use your trolling motor to get on that. Again, the down south twisted T in the original size and the burner shad have been good up on the shoreline. White ice has been good in both knock and tail and down south. The heavy metal, another one, honeydew in the knock and tail has been pretty good as well. A little bit more stained water. The honeydew really stands out and does a really good job. Redfish seem to be liking it. A few trout have seemed to be liking it. But again, the trout that we've been catching up on this shoreline is still, a lot of them are the undersized in that 14, 15, 16. Get an occasional 17 and a half, 18, but main thing we're targeting up here is redfish all up and down this shoreline. So take your time with that. Work all this area here. Again, majors and minors is the key point for throwing artificials right now. That's been the most productive time frame whenever that has fallen. Again, with the new moon that we're going to be in this upcoming week, you should have some great opportunities if you get to fish this area. Spend some time up in here, and you will be rewarded with finding some quality fish all up and down the shoreline.
Thanks for watching. I'm Captain Larry Bell.